Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a live streaming webinar here on Facebook with Open in Indiana. Today we have a very special speaker, Gina Covarrubias with Deliberate Doing, who has her presentation on how to get along with stress. Gina, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, Ryan. Thank you for asking, and I'm super excited to be here today.
We are very happy that you were able to come and share with us today your topic. So I will yield the floor to you, and your PowerPoint is now up on the screen for our viewers.
Okay, perfect. I would like to pause here on the title page for a moment as I give a little bit of background about myself. I am an engineering life coach, and I have my own life coaching business. And I used to be an engineer, and I worked in the corporate world. I worked in academia. I also worked for the federal government for some time. And the reason I'm explaining this up front is because this topic is very near and dear to my heart today. And in my previous career, we could say I experienced a bit of burnout a few times in my career, and that burnout resulted in stress. And at one point, my stress levels were, I believe, high enough that I started experiencing some physical health problems, and I had to take some time away from work while I worked on recovering. And when I say some time, I'm talking a year and a half. And so, long story short, I think I allowed my stress levels to go as far as they could. And so once I started recovering and I ended up going back to work eventually, a few years after this experience, I decided I was going to leave my profession as an engineer, and I didn't quite know what my future was going to look like. I just knew I wanted to do something different. So I left the profession and I discovered life coaching. And life coaching instantly resonated with me. So I earned my certificate, and now what I do is I blend my background of engineering and life coaching. So if you were to go to my website, you would see that I tailor my speaking and my talks to the STEM working professional, and STEM means science, technology, engineering, math. And so what I do for STEM professionals is I help them evaluate their careers in the context of their lives, and I help them align their careers with who they are as a person. Now, in reality, any human person can be my ideal client. And so today, what I'd like to do is talk to you about stress, and I was very deliberate in my title, How to Get Along with Stress today, because it is not titled how to get away from stress, how to make stress go away. Rather, what I'm going to talk to you about today is how you can exist with stress in your life. And having said that, we can move on to the next slide, and I will go over my outline. Okay, so I'm going to give a very brief introduction to what life coaching is. After that, I'm going to talk to you about how we as humans experience the world around us. And then after that, I want to introduce an idea called confirmation bias. And sections 1, 2, and 3 are very important to our conversation today because it sets the tone for talking about stress, and it will help give you a relevant background when you think about stress in your life. So in section 4, we will get to stress and talk about that a little bit, as well as why we experience stress. So those also lead into section 6, how to get along with stress. And again, what this section emphasizes is that you don't have to run away from it. You don't have to get rid of it. Rather, you can exist side by side with stress. And then I will end with section 7, conclusions, summary, and then take a few questions after that. So we can move on to the next slide, life coaching introduction. Okay, intro to life coaching. For those of you who may not know, life coaching is a concept that was invented to help people manage their emotional life. And the next bullet is very important. Our society often does not teach us. We don't go to school and learn how to manage our emotions. And our emotions are so pivotal and vital to the way we conduct our lives, but nobody really teaches us what emotions are for or what we're supposed to do with them. And life coaching also helps you answer the question, how can I be present with what is? Life coach, if you work with a life coach, they will help you understand that no matter your circumstances, everything can be okay. And it's a matter of perspective. In the middle there, it says life coaching fills the gap between self-help and formal therapy. So many of us, probably at some point in time, have picked up some self-help books. And there are even some people who go as far as to hire a therapist to help them solve some of their issues. However, the majority of our population is somewhere in between. So life coaching was introduced to help fill this gap between very informal self-help and going to a formal therapist. And toward the bottom of the slide, life coaching also helps you understand what you are thinking and why, and it helps you put your own life into perspective. And that first bullet there is very important. You must understand yourself before you can change yourself. If your life is not going well or if you're not feeling well, it's really best to understand what's going on right now, why is this happening, before you try to change and make things better. And if you work with a life coach, that's what they would help you do. And the next bullet on this slide, life coaching is not advising. So I do not advise people as a life coach. And what I mean by that is I don't tell people what to do. And I don't offer suggestions based on your story. I don't tell you whether or not you should or should not get a divorce, or you should choose A over B, or there's no advising you in how to live your life because I don't know what's best for you. Rather, what I do as a life coach is I take you through a process and I ask you questions to help you unravel the answers for yourself. The next one, life coaching is not counseling. I do not have a counseling degree, and I am not a lawyer, so I do not counsel people. And the last one is I'm not a therapist. Therapists are doctors, and I am not a doctor. I am a certified life coach. And there are many different schools as far as life coaching, and they all have their own certifications. And so I want to be very clear up front. I don't advise, counsel, or offer therapy. So having said that, let's move on to the next slide. We are on slide 4. This is section 2, how humans experience their surroundings. Now this is very important. This is also a little bit of background in life coaching, and this will also help us put stress in perspective for the rest of the presentation. As humans, there are 2 ways that we experience the world around us. Number 1 is through sensations. So we've got the 5 senses, right? And all of our senses start at your body, and what they do is they travel up to your brain, and your brain processes these senses. and it tells you this is hot, this is warm, and so on. The second way that humans experience the world is through their own thoughts and beliefs. And let's go down to that first bullet. Your thoughts and beliefs start in your brain, and then they travel through your body as a feeling or as an emotion, opposite of what sensations do. As I mentioned, a sensation starts at the body and goes up to the brain, but a thought and belief starts in the brain and travels through your body. It travels through your body as a feeling or an emotion. And a feeling is simply an arrangement of your body tissues at any given moment. And the third bullet at the bottom says it is your human privilege to choose your thoughts and your beliefs. And this is going to be a very important point for the rest of the conversation today as well. So, you get to choose your thoughts and your beliefs. I want to talk about that a little bit more in depth on the next slide, but before we head to the next slide, I do want to make it clear that when it comes to life coaching, we focus here on number 2. As a life coach, I focus on my clients' thoughts and beliefs. Life coaching is not about dealing with sensations, which is number 1. So, having said that, let's move on to the next slide and talk about how it's your human privilege to be able to choose your own thoughts and beliefs. Okay, starting at the top. Your brain likes to offer familiar thoughts to you, but you get to decide. So this is very important. Your brain offers thoughts to you. And maybe nobody has ever told you this before, but you get to decide if you want to believe those thoughts. So I want to make that very clear, that just because thoughts are popping into your head, that doesn't mean you have to listen to them. In fact, I would say you need to be in charge of your thoughts, and you need to decide what makes sense for you to believe. Second bullet, neural pathways are connected brain nerves that carry electrical impulses associated with your thoughts and your feelings. So your brain has this whole network of nerves, and those nerves carry electrical impulses. Those impulses are associated with your thoughts and your feelings. In the next bullet, what I'm saying here is that it's almost as if your neural pathways in your brain are like the muscles you have in your body. So moving down to the bottom bullet, the more you think and believe a certain thought, the stronger that nerve is going to be in your brain. The more you think and believe whatever it is you think, the stronger that neural pathway is in your brain. And that's very important to know because neural pathways, just like muscles, can be changed. They can be made stronger or they can go away. So, very last bullet, similar to a personal trainer at the gym who helps you build muscle, my job as a life coach is to help you build new neural pathways in your brain so that you can think different or better thoughts to help you improve your life. Let's move on to the next slide. Starting from the top, your brain seeks evidence to prove prior beliefs are true. This is an idea called confirmation bias. And this might be something you may have heard if you took a psychology course at some point. But our brain likes to seek evidence to prove its beliefs are true. And the reason it does that is because the brain wants to be correct. It wants to feel comfortable. It wants to be efficient. And if your brain can prove to itself that its beliefs are true, then it will feel correct and it will feel like it's doing its job. So let's use President Trump as an example to demonstrate confirmation bias. Now, we're on a virtual call, but if we were all together in a room I might ask the question, raise your hand if you are a proponent of President Trump. And some of you would raise your hands. And I would ask, how many of you do not care for President Trump? And then some of you would raise your hands. So for those of you who really take a liking to President Trump, most likely, chances are, you will agree with most things that he says. You will agree with most of his policies. And those of you who do not care for President Trump will most likely not agree with him. Now, this is an example of confirmation bias because if you really, really believe that you like him and that he's a great president, then your brain is going to scan for all kinds of evidence to prove that that is true. And if you like President Trump and the things that he does, and you watch the news, you're going to say to yourself or to your friends, oh, see what he did there? That was a really good move. I really like what he said. I like that speech. He made the right choice there, and on and on and on. And for those of you who don't care for him, you would do the same thing. Oh, look what he said this time. He really put his foot in his mouth there, didn't he? And so on and so on. So this is one easy example of confirmation bias. Whatever you believe is what your brain is going to try to find evidence to support. So in the middle here, in the middle of the slide, this is very important. If we don't question and challenge our own beliefs, we are apt to become prisoners of our own assumptions. In other words, have an open mind. And again, this goes back to your brain offering thoughts to you. Just because your brain offers thoughts doesn't mean you have to believe them. Question everything. Challenge your beliefs. And moving on to the bottom, our beliefs are reinforced by our brain's confirmation bias. Confirmation bias helps to build those strong neural pathways. Okay, so it's almost like, we'll call them, it's a muscle in your brain. Those strong neural pathways get stronger and stronger the more you believe whatever it is you believe. Okay, so this is all very important in the context of talking about stress. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, now we're getting into the good stuff. What is stress? So starting from the top, stress is a feeling. It is an emotion. Feelings and emotions are synonymous. A feeling is generated by your thoughts. Every time you have a feeling, it's due to the thoughts you're having in your brain, which is why, as I said earlier, it's very important to know that you can choose your own thoughts. You don't have to just take whatever it is your brain offers to you. So a feeling is generated by your thoughts. It is a result of what you're thinking. Second bullet there, feelings are vibrations in the body, and while they can be uncomfortable, they cannot hurt you. It's very, very important to know that. Feelings cannot hurt you in and of themselves. They are only small vibrations felt in the body. Moving on, us humans address negative feelings in many ways. And I specifically use negative here, even though sometimes stress can be good, sometimes it can be helpful. But for our purposes today, we're talking about negative stress. So how do we deal with negative stress? We hide from it. We react to it. And reacting could involve yelling and screaming or blaming people. Sometimes we run away from stress. We try to cover it up. Or we substitute and we try to find something to make ourselves feel better in the moment. We overindulge. Maybe we watch too much TV. Maybe we take too many trips to the refrigerator. Maybe we overwork. Maybe we oversleep. These are all different ways that we could potentially deal with any negative emotion, especially stress. And the problem is that you're not actually dealing with it. You're just kind of putting it off. And This bullet here underneath, negative feelings usually come back stronger, is very, very important. The more you push it away, shove it away, the more you try to run away from it, the more it's going to come back stronger and stronger every time. So it's really important to know that about stress. And here at the bottom, this is also really, really important to know. Resisting stress is actually worse than the stress itself. Oftentimes, we want to resist it, and we want it to go away. And we tell ourselves, why can't I get a hold of this? Why can't I solve this? And what that does is it leads to anxiety, or it may lead to more stress. So we have to be very careful when it comes to stress. We don't want to try to resist, because that will just come back and bite you even more. Okay, moving on. Next slide, please. All right, why do we experience stress? This is also helpful to know if you want to try to get a hold of stress in your life. Number one, it's a habit of your brain. You have built strong neural pathways for easy access to stress. Okay, so we talked about neural pathways, very, very important. The stronger the neural pathway in your brain, the more your brain is going to want to use it. When you believe a thought over and over and over, for example, if you keep telling yourself, I'm so stressed, I don't know what to do, I'm so stressed, I'm overwhelmed. The more you believe that, the more you're going to create a strong neural pathway. The stronger the neural pathway is for your brain, the more your brain wants to use it. So of course you're going to keep telling yourself you're stressed and overwhelmed. And then it just gets worse and worse, and you perpetuate this cycle. So it's very important to be aware that it's a habit that your brain likes to do because it's easy. The second item here, stress seems to serve a purpose in our lives. So for example, the first line, if I don't feel stressed, I must not care. If I don't show this other person I'm stressing out, then they may not think that I care. Okay, that's just a lie that we tell ourselves. And the second one is very common too. The more I stress about my work or about whatever it might be, the more I'll get done. The more I stress, the more productive I'll be. And that's also another lie that we tell ourselves. So it's very important to understand that when stress is a negative feeling, you're not going to have a positive outcome. And then going to the bottom, stress is propagated by confirmation bias. And that's what I mentioned a minute ago. The more you tell yourself, I'm so stressed, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so this, I'm so that, the more your brain is going to gather evidence to support that thought. So first bullet, confirmation bias helps the brain feel correct. And the brain doesn't even care what it's correct about. It's not the brain's job to tell you that you shouldn't feel stressed. The brain just has a thought, and it wants to know that it's right. So it's very important for you to be in charge of your brain. And what I tell some of my clients is that you can almost treat your brain as though it's a toddler running around wild. You have to tell it what to do. You have to direct it. And that means you have to be self-aware. Very, very important for stress. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please. Now we move on to section 6, how to get along with stress. Okay, this is what we've all been waiting for. And again, I want to reiterate, I was very deliberate in the naming of this presentation. There's a reason I did not name it How to Make Stress Go Away. There's a reason I did not name it How to Run Away from Stress. Rather, what I'm going to talk about is how you can get along in your life with stress present. So, number one thing you can do to get along with stress is to recognize when you're engaging in some of those self-destructive behaviors. Are you hiding from stress? Are you reacting? Are you running away? Do you find yourself making several trips to that refrigerator like many of us are doing, or watching too much TV, or getting on Facebook too much, or sleeping too much, or whatever the case may be? Try to understand what it looks like for you if you are engaging in behaviors that are not serving. Number two, the next thing you can do is ask yourself, what is the thought generating my stress? So what I taught you earlier in this presentation is that all of your feelings come from your thoughts. Stress is a feeling. Therefore, stress is coming from a thought or several thoughts. If you can understand your thoughts, you can either, number one, work to change them if you desire to change the thoughts, and that's where a life coach comes in handy. I help my clients change their perspective. I help them change their belief so that they could build new neural pathways in their brain and live a better life. So, if you can understand your thought, you can work to change it. But sometimes thoughts are very elusive. Sometimes it's very difficult to pinpoint certain thoughts. And maybe it's not practical for you to hire a life coach, and it's not practical for you to try to think of different perspectives. Okay, so then what do? Number three, you practice self-compassion, and I cannot stress this enough. There are so many people who are in the habit of beating themselves up over the way they're feeling. And it's bad enough you have stress, but yet people beat themselves up for even having the stress. So on that first bullet here, what I want to emphasize is that all of us are humans. You are only human. Negative feelings are part of all of our human experience, and that includes stress. So what I want to say is give yourself a break. Have some compassion. Treat yourself kindly. It's okay if you have some stress. Along with that, avoid negative self-judgment. And I hear this a lot from my clients. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling like this. What's wrong with me? I should be able to handle this. I should be stronger. Should have done this, should have done that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that negative self-talk will not get you anywhere. That is a self-destructive habit that does not feed into your self-confidence. In fact, it erodes your self-confidence. So have compassion, avoid negative self-judgment. The next thing, and the next slide is dedicated to this. Allow stress to be present. And let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. I want to talk about this concept of allowing it. This is one of the best things that you can do to help yourself deal with stress and deal with it in a positive way. What the heck do I mean by allowing stress? Starting from the top, identify, first of all, what stress looks like for you. Stress is different for everybody. And I want you to think for yourself, how do you currently deal with your stress in your life? And why do you think you're dealing with it that way? And honestly, take 5 or 10 minutes, and I would encourage you to get a piece of paper and write this question down. How am I dealing with stress? Write down all the different answers you can think of. And try to answer for yourself why. Why am I doing this? Why am I choosing this? Because it is your choice. So it's very helpful, number one, to identify for yourself what your stress looks like, because it's going to be different for everybody. And then the next step is to embrace stress. So first bullet, carry it with you like it's a heavy purse, a heavy backpack, like it's a pair of glasses that you wear, or like it's a sprained ankle that you have. Some of us carry diseases with us. Some of us carry aches and pains around with us wherever we go. Some of us are inconvenienced by physical ailments. What I want you to try to think about is to live your life and go about your daily living as if stress was your shadow, as if it's your partner. You could call it your friend almost. It's okay to go about your daily life with this idea that stress is going to be there. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to my virtual meetings. I'm going to do my work at night, and I'm going to be stressed, and that's okay. Second bullet, allow it to follow you around as if it's your shadow. You don't have to run away from stress. You don't have to try to get rid of it. Now, if you can figure out how to do that in a positive way, that's great. More power to you. That's difficult for a lot of people. So if you can't figure out how to mitigate it, how to make it go away, then as the second bullet says, allow it. Just allow it to follow you around. And the third bullet, be open. Open your mind to this idea that you can coexist with stress at your side. It is very, very possible to do that. It might sound like a foreign concept to you. It might be something you have to work at. I'm certainly not saying it's an easy thing to do, but it's possible. Tell yourself that you can be open to coexisting with it at your side. And the reason for that is because the very last sentence at the bottom, you can still conduct your life as you get along with stress. I can't emphasize enough, it's okay if it's there. You don't have to try to get rid of it. You don't have to run away from it. You don't have to engage in negative behaviors to cover up the stress. If you could practice allowing it and embracing it, then you can practice getting along with it in your life. And after so long, just like wearing a pair of glasses or just like carrying that heavy purse or just like living with that disease, it just becomes part of who you are. It becomes part of your life. And it's okay. And it's okay. Stress is part of our human experience. I really want you to remember that. Okay, moving on. Next slide, please. Here is our conclusions and our summary page. So these are all very important. I want to go over these one more time for those of you that have been watching since the beginning. First of all, it is your human privilege to be able to think thoughts on purpose. This goes back to what I said before about being in charge of your brain. Treat it as though it's a toddler running around. Take charge of it. You decide what you want to believe. Just because your brain offers you thoughts and beliefs doesn't mean you have to accept them. Second bullet, thoughts create your feelings. This is why it's so very important to think thoughts on purpose and take charge of your brain, because your thoughts are giving you your feelings, which leads to the third bullet. Stress is a feeling. Feelings in and of themselves cannot harm you. They're just simply vibrations in your body. It's just an arrangement of tissues in your body. The next bullet, very important to remember that stress is much worse when you try to resist it. So once again, I'm advocating here in my presentation today, you don't have to get rid of it. You don't have to hide or run away. And please don't resist it, because the negative stress will come back and haunt you even more later on. And as I mentioned earlier, stress can be okay. Sometimes it's a positive thing. But for today's talk, we're talking about negative stress. And finally, the last bullet, practice allowing it. Allow stress to be present if you cannot figure out how to get rid of it. It is possible to coexist with stress by your side and do the things that you need to do and still live a happy, productive life. And I want to end with the statement at the bottom. Stress is part of our human experience. It does not have to rule over you. And that's very important for you to remember. Don't let it rule your life. Don't let it take you down. You can still do the things you need to do with the stress there. Again, it's not easy, and I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight, but this is something you could try to practice on your own. Just allow it to exist with you as if it were another ailment. And that concludes this presentation, we can move on to the next slide, which contains some of my contact information, as well as my website. If you have any questions, if you want to discuss something further, please always send me a note. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. If you want a private phone call one-on-one, that is something that we can arrange for sure. I always offer free coaching to all of my potential clients before they make any sort of commitment with me so that they can understand how I operate as a coach and so they can decide if it's worth investing in some coaching for themselves. So at the top, that's my business email. Please feel free to send me questions or comments there. And in the middle of the page is my website, deliberatedoing.com. And I love the phrase at the bottom that deliberate thinking is deliberate doing. And that is true. That is very true because, once again, we get to choose our thoughts. And our thoughts provide us our feelings, and then we take action based on those feelings. So, very important to be in charge of your own brain. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. I would be happy to bring Ryan on at this point and see if we have any questions or comments.
Okay, Gina, our first question this afternoon is from Christian Tombers in Noblesville, Indiana. And his question is, are activities we choose to participate in, such as sports, roller coasters, etc., considered to be deliberate stress for our enjoyment, the benefit of excitement and exhilaration?
Okay, I'm reading your question. Oh, it's about deliberate stress for our enjoyment. Okay, for the benefit of excitement. Actually, you could, if you get on that roller coaster on your own, that is a thrill, right? You want the feeling of thrill. And that, I would argue, is an example of positive stress. However, I have been forced a few times to get on a roller coaster. I did not want to get on. That was not fun. That was not positive stress. That was negative stress. So, absolutely, I would consider that to be a form of positive stress because it's a thrill and you're seeking it out. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Yes, that's a great activity if you want to do it.
Gina, I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur and small business owner, what are some ways that as a business owner we can help turn that stress into a positive energy?
How do you turn negative stress into positive stress? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that is actually a really good question. And the first thing I would recommend is, number one, you have to recognize, and this goes back to one of my slides, you have to identify what stress looks like for you, because it's going to be different for everybody. The second thing I would do, and of course, I always advocate, I'm a big advocate of writing things down. Write down where you think your negative stress is coming from. What are the thoughts that you're thinking? What are you believing that is leading you to cause this negative stress? And you might think it's a circumstance that's out of your control. You might be right about that. You might not be. And as a life coach, what I do is I help people make that distinction between a circumstance and a thought. So, number one, write down the ways that you're stressing. What are you doing? How are you trying to deal with it? Number two, write down your thoughts. Try to get access to your brain. And you might be surprised how the exercise of writing things down really, really helps open your eyes and makes you think differently. So that's the second thing I would recommend, is try to access those thoughts. What are the thoughts that are leading you to feel stressed? The third thing is that once you access those thoughts, I would really evaluate them. And this goes back to what I said on one of my slides. Question everything. Challenge your brain. Ask yourself, do I really, really believe that's true? Or can I change this perspective a little bit? And again, as a coach, I work with people to help them change their perspective on things so that they don't have to change their circumstances in life. And once you get to that point, if you've gotten that far, you may have determined that the stress is so small that you can live with it. You may determine that the stress is at a level where you can actually channel it and use it as positive stress. And as I said, sometimes we tell ourselves, if I stress more, then I'll get more. That really is a lie. So if you could tell yourself, I'm a little bit stressed right now, I'm under a little bit of pressure, and I work better under pressure. If that works for you, then great. That's one example of how you could try to turn it into positive stress. So at the end of the day, if you are making decisions that are helping you, if they're self-serving, and you feel like it's coming from a place of stress, then I would call that positive stress. If you're making decisions that are not self-serving, if they are adding more stress, or if they're self-destructive, I would call that negative stress. So, kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but to summarize, write things down. What does my stress look like? How am I trying to deal with it? What are the thoughts leading to my stress? And that's a really good thinking exercise, really good brain exercise all of us can do.
Excellent, Gina. Thank you. I do not see any more questions here. So we'll go
Okay.
ahead and let's go ahead and give viewers an opportunity. Go ahead and tell them how they can get in touch with you. I still have your contact info up on the screen, but why don't you share how viewers can get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
If anybody wants to learn more, if anybody wants to have a chat one-on-one, I'm more than happy to do that. I also do group speaking engagements. I'm happy to talk to you about that if you work with a group who might benefit from a talk. First of all, you can email me at my business email, gina@deliberatedoing.com. You can send any questions my way. You can send comments my way. You can tell me, hey, I saw your presentation about stress, and I was wondering this. I was wondering about that. I'm more than happy to try to help answer any of your questions. My website, Deliberate Doing, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is geared toward a very specific market, and that market is STEM professionals. So professionals working in the science, technology, engineering, or mathematics environments. And what I do is I help STEM professionals evaluate their careers in terms of who they are as people. I help them evaluate their career journey in the context of who they are as a person, because sometimes careers do not always line up with the personality. And there are a lot of people in the STEM world who struggle with that. So that is my main target. However, you could always go and check out my videos and my blogs on my website for additional information. And I would encourage anybody who is thinking about getting some coaching or who just wants to learn more about it, send me an email. I always welcome questions and comments.
Excellent. Gina, thank you so much for being our guest speaker today. And to all of our
Thank you for having me. This was great.
You're very welcome. And all of our viewers, thank you so much for watching today. Make sure to catch us Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock for a live online webinar here on Facebook, Understanding the CARES Act for Small Business Owners. Have a great afternoon, everybody.